I think so. Hey, hello, can you hear us now?
We got it working. Yay!
So, fair warning, everybody. Me, Carolee, and I are rolling in this pretty hot today. Technology and some dogs, and it's been one of those mornings.
It's been one of those mornings, and I'm still sick, everybody, so... But we wanted to come on and get some stuff rolling and at least, talk.
Hey, Serge.
Hey, Serge.
Good to see you. Yeah, so thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carolee, for showing up while you're sick. Hey, we want to make sure we have a show every week, and that's cool. So be patient with us and help us out while we get through everything.
Please forgive me while I look like absolute garbage. I'm getting over the flu, so it's been a mess. It's been a total mess. But... Oh, and we have all three of our dogs here with us today.
So we'll start with...
We got Beetles.
Here's
This is Ruby.
Okay, she hates this.
You hate it, huh, Beeps?
Okay, that's Ruby.
Yeah.
If you haven't met her. Finny, do you want to come say hi?
Yeah.
Hold on. Finny. Like, special doggos edition. Running Westholme.
Hi,
the rest
Mama.
of the fam. Oh, what am I doing? That's Finny voice, by the way.
voice.
Like, everybody has a voice for their dogs, right? And that's just,
Bubba, do you want to come back up? What a good boy. You're a good boy, Bubba.
So there may be some barking dogs or other chaos occurring with the animals. Forgive us. Working on it.
Yeah.
So we wanted to come today and talk a little bit. We've had some questions and we've used this terminology a little bit in the past about class.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to dive in and go a little bit like, what's that mean? What's your class? And kind of how do you break that concept down in terms of growth especially?
Yeah, absolutely. And the important part about your class is that once you recognize what it is, then you can kind of work to get better.
Yeah.
Do better.
Hey, yeah, and I think a lot of it is about Finny here. So this is the thing we're talking about right here. See, he's trying to get his toys, so his stumpy legs are dramatically failing.
Yeah,
the ability for him to get his toys right.
Absolutely.
So how's this going? How you do it? Okay. Sorry. So with your class, one of the things we really wanted to talk about is, I think identifying what it is an important first step.
Sure.
And I think there's a little bit of a difference between what you might want your class to be and what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think one of the things we wanted to go through is talking about how do you determine what class you are? How does that help you focus your growth in the right areas? We can't all be great at everything. And how does it help you? And how do we avoid some certain kind of like common risk areas around this kind of thing? Like, potential ways to cop out or potential ways to, kind of dodge the hard growth. Come on, Ollie. Sorry again, dogs.
We got Ollie walking around and being crazy. So I think one of the good things to pay attention to when you're trying to figure out what your class is your natural behavior. Like, what are you best at?
That's right. And I think it's not even just about only the skill, although I do think that matters. But like, kind of everybody, I feel like if you are kind of like, if you watch your biases and the way you behave and the way you attack problems consistently, thanks, Ollie, you lean against the cart there. What are the behaviors you naturally do? What are the things that you find yourself kind of with a lower amount of effort? You don't have to force yourself to do these. How do you?
Absolutely.
And this isn't even specific. Like, I like to draw. Like, that's good, but like, how do you even approach that? I think this is the first step in finding your class. Like, do you tend to like to kind of sort things out first and then draw down? Do you start at a detail and then work up?
Yeah.
Do you see it as problems, opportunities? These kinds of things are ways that you can start determining kind of what your class is through watching your behavior instead of trying to force yourself to be someone you're not without limiting growth. And I think this is something you can talk to with a little bit of expertise.
Sure.
You're like, I'm surprised by this. Sorry.
Yeah.
But there's, and maybe we'll go into that a little later, which is just kind of finding a way that you're not, what's that old saying? If you try to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll always think it's dumb.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that applies really strongly to classes. Is like, how are we going to determine the right growth opportunities for you?
Absolutely. And I think, like you were saying, these might not be strengths per se, but they are things that you naturally lean on. Things like And I don't know if you consider this the type of thing, but like introvert or extrovert.
Yeah, I would say it's a component of class. Yeah. Like it's almost like how do you navigate the world?
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody.
Sort of like a Myers-Briggs almost.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a lot of like kind of like psychology and pop psychology versions of this. And I think we're just trying to break it down into something, Westholme-ified.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, a lot of these are, I think, one of the biggest traps we can get into when it comes into growth, and why I think we even want to talk about class at all, is I think it's really tempting to see kind of an idealized idea of like success. Like you see like some person running a company or doing something you want to do, or, they have this kind of like, they're like idealized on the gram, or something like this. And you have this kind of...
He's hanging out here.
Yeah, starting Snorlax. So we think that's a key component. Like that kind of stuff can be really distracting. Like, well, I'm here and they're this ultra idealist person and they're doing all these things. And you and have you been in this case? I've been in this case a bunch. I think you have, where I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so not like that. I'm so not like that, but I need to be like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trying to grow in that way, I found it gets you in the weeds. And this kind of gets into what's your class about, right? So if I think about, like, let's even break it down into roles maybe, like tank, healer, and DPS, right? If let's say you're a healer, let's say your role is a healer in kind of how you see your class. And you can self-define this, we'll go into that in a minute.
Yeah.
And you evaluate yourself on your DPS.
Yeah.
How are you going to feel? Are you going to feel like you're going to be, wow, I really underperform here. I really feel like I'm bad. I don't feel like these other people are doing great DPS.
Yeah.
While your success criteria is being measured against the wrong type of thing. You're setting yourself up to be disappointed with your success criteria because you're not playing to your natural... You're not playing, to lack of a better word, who you are. Yeah. That however old you are, you have that many years experience being that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
You probably have a lot of expertise in being that person, whether you're always successful or not. You know how. So I think using that as a launching point for your class, and I think we always joke around at our classes that you're a paladin.
For sure.
And I'm a rogue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell me, I think let's take a minute and go, and this is very specific definitions. I think one thing is that the class definition should be personal to you. Yeah. It should resonate for you. It doesn't have to fit unlike an actual game, it doesn't actually have a set rule.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe go into a little bit, when you say you're a paladin, I think that means certain things to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying, it means different things to different people. So some people will hear my description and be like, that's not what I would call it. But
exactly. And that doesn't matter. This is key. Yeah. Nobody else is allowed to tell you what class you are.
That's true.
So
unless you're curious, unless you're like, oh, I'm really lost on this. What do you think my class is?
Right.
Getting some input from others is totally acceptable.
Asking what spec you've actually rolled for your guildmates is probably a useful activity if you're curious.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
At the end of the day, you are judge, jury, executioner for your classes.
Absolutely.
So you want to go into a little bit. Why are you a paladin? What's that mean to you?
Because I'm vengeance for the Holy Light. No. I am vengeance. I am Batman.
I am vengeance. I like swords.
I like swords and shit. Which is true. I like bigger swords and some armor.
That's true.
As opposed to save for you who doesn't.
Yeah. But when you talk about this in your course of growth and how you navigate the world. Yeah. What makes you a paladin?
I think it's that I tend to focus on being lawful good. I think my alignment has a lot to do with it. As many of you know, I'm currently training to be a life coach, and so helping others is really important to me. That's why I think it's really what I call vengeance for the Holy Light is probably closer to that, where it's just I just really like to help people. I've kind of gone through my own journey of acceptance of a lot of stuff, and I see that as kind of critical to the kind of paladin. It's you have to be trained. And you may have a natural aptitude, but I kind of see that as part of my journey of going through the depression and anxiety that I've gone through and things like that. It's all part of this whole journey for me. So that's kind of why I see myself as a paladin. That's kind of the one I would use.
Right. And I think this is important because what we're talking about here is you'll notice even in Carolee's description, we're not going over our weaknesses yet. Many times, and we'll talk about this, your strength is also related to your weakness very clearly.
Yeah,
what you're good at is usually going to create exhaust fumes onto what you're bad at, right?
For sure.
But when we think about class, let's just start with, we don't want to get into the negative and the self-critical yet. Look, don't worry, this isn't all happy-dappy. We're not going to not have real conversations on Westholme. But don't start there. We can get there later. And I trust that anybody who's here, and if you're thinking about self-growth, I don't think self-doubt or self-critique is a lack that most of us have when we're in this subject. I think that's a place that's easy to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, I'm a rogue. And the reason I say that is I'm actually like the least sneaky person you've ever met in your entire life. Some people would say they're a rogue because they're really subtle or they're really, really careful. I'm none of those things. I'm a bull in a china shop on a sneaky day. But I am generally pretty good at avoiding things that I'm very good about picking my battles.
Yeah.
You know, I come in stealth and I look at that and I go, that's not going to be a good thing for me to attack. Or if something attacks me and I don't want to, I know how to get out of dodge with minimal damage.
For sure.
This is important to me. And also I know how to focus and strike and target the exact thing that I want to hit almost. And again, like we said, we're not going to focus on the weaknesses, but you can see how these things are like, you're like, are those good things? They are in the right scenario with the right mindset.
For sure.
And sometimes they can come out as weaknesses that I have to deal with. But that's how we kind of see our class as an example for how you can see it. So I would even start right now, if you're watching this, what class are you? And it doesn't have to be World of Warcraft. We use World of Warcraft because it's shared language.
Absolutely.
Your favorite game of anything. It could even be something like a shooter or something like that. If it feels resonant, then it's correct. That's your first step. If it means something to you as a framework. Like I know you use your framework a lot to go, hey, am I doing what's kind of in accordance with my values?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you use that as evaluation criteria for yourself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of important for me personally, and feeds more into the Paladin kind of mindset, is that it's like, oh yeah, like me being in accordance with my values is super important to me. And it's part of my driving force.
Right.
So,
and for me, it's always, is this a battle I should take? Is this, I always say, I always call Twitter Harry Potter and the dumbest hill to die on. That's clearly representative of how I see the world. Is some things matter a lot and some things matter very little to me.
Yeah.
That's being targeted, being focused, picking my battles. That's extremely like a North Star for how I guide life. Yeah. Right? You'll have your own, and it's personal and unique, and it should be. Yeah, absolutely. So I think with that, let's talk about maybe, did we give everything? Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Sorry, I had to look at the notes. I did not prepare for this very much at all. So I think with that, we should talk about kind of what do you do with that? If you have this class, if you're a paladin, a rogue, or a thief in Serge's case, what do you do with that information? How do you leverage that to grow? And I think the first thing to do is start with, okay, if I know I'm a rogue and I'm going to target these things, I'm going to navigate the world in this way, what's a successful version of that? I'm not going to critique it. I'm not going to loathe it. I'm not going to judge it. I'm going to be kind to it. And then go, what does a good rogue do? What does my version of a rogue do? What's maybe my spec? But what's my outcome? Do I want to be doing top DPS on meters? Do I want to be CCing the right mobs and kind of making sure everything's around? This is about setting your personal criteria in accordance with kind of how you navigate the world. So for me, example I would use is I want to make sure that the things I'm weighing as important, the battles I'm taking, actually are in accordance with things I want to see in the world. Are they creating win-win scenarios for myself and the other people in my guild? Are they creating, do we look at the outcome and go, hey, that was good? It's a very practical outlook, but I can start setting set criteria around that. And then we can get into SMART goals, which is something that I know Kara Lee both will espouse and is very good at. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit about how to set a good goal.
Yeah, and I'm going to look up what SMART stands for. I've said it so many times.
I know, right?
And I never can remember all of them. So I feel like today is the day we're going to look it up on Wikipedia. Okay. So SMART stands for specific, so that it targets a specific area for improvement. Measurable, quantify, or at least suggest an indicator of progress.
I like at least suggest, knowing that you're going, I can't quantify that, which I say all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Assignable. Specify who will do it. Realistic. State what results can realistically be achieved given available resources. And available resources could be your own HP and MP, how much time you have, all those types of things are resources that
available group size and guild mates that can help you on this thing too.
All those things are
everything
resources to think of. And then time related. Specify when the result can be achieved by. So those are SMART goals. So it's like if you want to think of a SMART goal versus a not so smart goal. Like a not so smart goal would be like, I want to lose weight.
Right.
Or even worse, I want to feel better about my body. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, like, that's cool. That's a good feeling to have.
Yeah.
That feeling could spark action.
For sure.
But don't mistake it for a goal.
Yeah. And so, versus a SMART goal. So, like, what would be a specific thing where it's like, okay, I want to do yoga 3 times a week. Measurable, a quantify or at least suggest an indicator of progress. So 3 times a week would be a measurable goal.
Yep.
Assignable, specify who will do it, you will do it.
And this, in many cases, it will be you.
Yeah, when you're doing your own SMART goals, a lot of the time it will be you, but this, is originally created for businesses and things like that, so it could have been an opportunity where somebody else could have done it, where it's like, or the person who was writing the goal was not the person who would end up doing it.
When this does still apply in personal goals, if asking for help, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go to yoga 3 times a week, and one of my things is, I'm going to lean on, or I'm going to ask for help for somebody.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about it, and their goal is to make sure they go, hey, I'm going to ask you each week if you went to yoga. Something little. Like, these are things that are okay to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So realistic, can it be realistically achieved? Yeah, probably. If you wanted to go to yoga 3 times a week, that's pretty doable unless you have an insane schedule.
Right.
And then time related, specify when the results can be achieved. So.
And I think it's like maybe it's also like how long minimum do you need to do this to commit? It's like maybe I'm going to go to yoga 3 times a week for 2 months and see how I feel.
Yeah.
I'm going to evaluate based on some outcome. That's a simple one.
Yeah.
This also is something I think about a lot at work and business. Strategy is a big component of this, and I'm not going to do a whole thing on strategy. It's not even the subject of this podcast. But I think what you want to do is like let's take a look at like a couple of ways we may use our class along with these kind of evaluative criteria to set up for success. I'm going to give you 2 examples from my career life that have been, one has been successful for me and one has been unsuccessful. And I think it's very related to this. This is what made me think about this. Is at one point, I'm a lead designer. Well, what's that mean, right? Like, okay, I'm also a rogue. I also have this way of navigating the world. And I see often other designers and other leaders who are doing things really differently than how I do them. And I feel inadequate sometimes, right? Or I realize I could be doing better at things. So I think our natural tendency is to like emulate these behaviors. Sure. But these people aren't rogues. And if they are, they're usually not the type of rogue I am, right? They have different strengths and weaknesses. The mistake I've made often is when making goals is I tried to set other success criteria. I saw somebody else, I went to the equivalency, let's say where you go back in our MMO world, right? And I went on to Icy Veins and saw what top DPS was and what the top rotation and spec is, and I'm like, I'm going to go play that. Yeah. And then I show up for raid every night, and I'm like, I fucking hate playing Outlaw Rogue. It's awful. Yeah. And I'm having a miserable time, and as a result, not kind of doing all the little bells and whistles of research and, like practice and spending the time on the target dummies. I'm missing all these opportunities that I think I would do if I was enjoying myself or felt it was more natural. This was really problematic for me probably a couple of years ago in my career, especially. I'm like, I'm going to do all these things. Spoiler alert, I didn't do a good job of those things. What I did instead is I realized, hey, as a rogue, I want to target something, and what's important to me, it needs to be hyper relevant. I'm like, you know what it is? Actually, mentorship, helping people, leadership, management, growth of others. And I don't see a lot of that around me. That's not super emulative in a lot of the other places I live. So I was able to set my own damage meters.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not going to hit this damage meter on Icy Veins, but you know what I'm doing? I'm CCing those ads on point. Yeah. I'm helping call targets. I'm helping do all these things like that. And that feels actually pretty satisfying, even though I've limited, and probably because my scope of growth in the career arena to something I can focus on and excel at.
Right.
While And then we'll go into, well, how do I work on my weaknesses? We'll go into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples you want to share with that, or does anything come to mind? I know your brain's a little fogged.
Yeah,
right
my
now,
brain's a little
so.
foggy. I did a lot of work this morning.
Yeah, you had coaching training this morning.
I had coaching this morning, yeah, so I'm a little bit coached out, but we'll do okay.
Yeah.
I think actually to bring it back to that, actually, that was one of the things I had to kind of look at was like, what am I going to do that's going to be successful for me, and for me to feel like I'm on purpose, which is important, you know, when you're somebody like me. And to get really clear about that was kind of important, but I don't think there was necessarily a goal I associated with it. I think it was a very crappy, non-smart goal for me to be like, oh yeah, you know, I want to be doing something that uses my strengths and stuff, you know, like that kind of stuff that's really easy to get into. I didn't have a smart goal to achieve that.
Well, I think you might have stumbled into one though. Like,
I can see that.
And that happens. Like, it's okay. I don't think everybody's going to sit down and go, on Sunday night, I'm going to pull out my notebook and we're going to scratch it. Like, I don't do that. I'm an idiot. So, like, and I don't think a lot of people navigate the world. Some people do, and that's great.
Sure.
But I think a lot of, like, you know, if we're talking again about pop psychology or the self-help stuff that you generally see, why it doesn't resonate with me in a lot of cases is it always kind of imagines you navigate the world as a CEO.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, when you're sitting down and doing your weekly planning for the day after you've done your grocery shopping, I'm like, you have way higher opinions of how much of an adult I am than I am, right? And I think that's something about this show, too, is it doesn't need to be that daunting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, in your case, you did determine, you actually had something I think was a little off class for you that you were doing for a bit. Not entirely, but you weren't, you know, it wasn't feeling as on purpose.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
With your previous endeavor. But it taught you what you needed. And it was able to start using that as like, whatever I do has to satisfy this criteria of my class of Paladin. I need to be able to add impact to others' lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once you realize that carves a bunch of builds out of icy veins that you're not going to pay attention to because they're not relevant anymore.
Absolutely.
Similar for me, right? Yeah. And I think that's an important way to use your class, even if you can't get to the SMART goal right away and then getting into the coaching, training, and other things, have gotten you to a place where you're like, you know what? This structure, I can kind of let this structure handle my making sure I'm getting it and not avoiding it.
Also, I just realized I'm making smoochy faces at Ruby, to be clear.
I kind of didn't think about it because we do it so often.
We do it so much.
We're just basically really smoochy and dumb with the dogs. I think everybody who has dogs is like this, or if not, well, we are, and unapologetically.
So she just put her head on his leg. Right now. And her foot on his foot, and I was just like, that's cute. And so I gave her a little smoochy face. But I realized I was making smoochy faces to the camera. People might not know what the heck is going on.
That's right. Okay, so, Ruby, that's enough. Sorry, she's a rowdy little baby sometimes. She's our little hippie girl. Anyway, so I think that's the key is like, whatever it is, make sure that your class is informing Ruby.
You want to pick her up?
Yeah, come on. You want up?
Yeah, there we go.
Somebody wants attention. I'm sure nobody's going to mind having an extra corgi on the street.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here we go. This
baby.
is not distracting at all. So with this, I want to talk, I think, using your class as your guiding light for what criteria matters to you, and then getting eventually to a measurable goal like, I want to do top DPS on meters. I want to make sure the main tank's healed all the time. I want to make sure, you know, there's no deaths in the raid. Right? These are other goals that aren't about the meters, and I think, you know, WoW might not be a perfect example for this on this front, but it's illustrative. Yeah. You should be able to use your class to define which goals do and don't matter to you, and I would say pick one. Just pick one outcome that really feels natural and important to you. Let's not worry about the details yet. The details are going to be situational. Maybe, you know, income's the most important thing that you have to get, a challenge you have to solve. And this comes into figuring out how to kind of like to improve at the things that maybe aren't awesome about that aren't the fun parts. Like, I think going out there and like doing top DPS or like doing the big flashy stuff in the raid is stuff we can all get kind of excited about on the growth front. Right. So what do we do about the things that our class is bad at, or that we're bad at, or that are our weaknesses? And a lot of times, like we said, they're associated with our class and our strengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
How how do we see that? Because I think one tempting thing, and I've done this in the past, is using that class definition as a way to cop out of harder growth. It's like, well, I like X and I don't like Y, so I'm not going to do Y. When is that a cop out, and when is that a real thing you get to make? And I think I kind of frame this in the Westholmean way of universal mechanics.
Yeah.
So let's say we're a rogue and a paladin, right? Rogue and a paladin, not the other way around. And we're doing a quest. We're fighting a boss. We're doing something. We're going to have different strengths and weaknesses. But there's stuff that everyone in the raid's got to pay attention to. Don't stand in fire. Don't be in front of the boss when he doesn't attack. These are, to me, the kind of framework I use for the things that you got to do regardless of your class.
Right, absolutely.
Like, for example, you're like, let's say some of you out there want to be game designers. Okay, something like that. Something I know. That's why I picked it. There's a bunch of stuff you want to do. You're like, I'm going to read all these interesting books and watch these things and try making a game. These things are fun. What are you going to do about consistently showing up to work and stuff like that? Is that a strength or a weakness for your class? How are you going to work with interacting with other people and communication skills? These aren't the things that are the reasons you necessarily want to get into them, and they may be strengths or weaknesses of your class, but you got to do them. If you stand in fire and you're dead, you ain't doing DPS if you're waiting for res.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it.
And so I think that's a really important thing to remember is this is where the unfun stuff starts happening. The things that we don't like. And I'm full of these.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a 40-year-old man, and I've recently, and I still say I'm not great at it, recently have learned how to not try to be childish about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard. You don't want to do it.
Hammers.
Yeah. I feel targeted here. Also during the chat.
Yeah.
But think about those things is like all the sexy parts are, I think, the easy parts for us to grow on. But so a lot of the times the universal mechanics, you're like, I'm ready to hit all my cooldowns and do that big time warp burst DPS. I'm excited about it. I've practiced. And then you're like, the boss is making me move all the time. Like, Yep. The boss is making you move all the time. And that's as important as the other thing, if a little less interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the way to kind of look at those weaknesses is to say, like, where is it impacting your ability to do good? Where is it impacting your ability to create what you want to create? And then working backwards from that to create smart goals to help fix that.
And I think you're, in this case, one thing I wanted to call out about the class thing, sorry, hi Ruby, is there's an idea that I think your strength can be your weakness, like we were talking about. I think the way to see it in gaming terms is it can be a crutch.
Yeah.
I've experienced this a lot. I think you've experienced this all in your own way, differently. Yeah. Here, Ruby, if you want to go over there, you can go over there.
No, I think she just wants to interact with me.
Okay. She's noisy. I think I think one way I've done is like, so if I'm a rogue and I'm good about targeting these specific things and kind of avoiding damage from non-important sources, a very relevancy-based kind of decision-making tree of how I navigate the world. Well, when you're used to being able to dodge stuff that you don't think is important, it's easy for me to be able to dodge stuff that is important and tell myself it's not important. That's the kind of thing I have to watch out. So let's say I have a high evasion skill and I'm fighting a boss. And I just stand in everything because I'm dodging it all the time. It's not that important. You know what? We get to a boss where that's not going to work anymore, and I'm like, why am I dying? And I fall over all the time, and I don't know what's going on because I've so gotten used to using this strength as a crutch when I need to be using other skills and you know, being a little bit more rounded.
Absolutely. Well-rounded is... So, I actually saw something the other day that I wanted to watch, and I didn't get a chance to. And this might be something that leads into later, but that being well-rounded is bullshit.
Yeah. And I think it is, honestly. Yeah. I think it's what I've learned. If like this is just a 40-year-old guy's thing who's gone through a lot of feelings of failure and imposter syndrome despite having paper success, is like I think that you need to be able to do everything is what class is trying to help you beat.
Absolutely.
That you don't need to be everything, and especially in today's world with like we're super interconnected. We have tons of ability to be influenced by things that are maybe important, probably not in most cases, but holy crap, can it seem important really quickly.
Right, absolutely.
You know, and I think that's important. So when we're talking about rounding yourself out, we're also not talking about being great at everything. I'm not going to be the best person who's going to go out there and do top TPS, ever. Yeah. That's okay. but there's probably a minimum level of DPS I need to be able to do to still get the other stuff done I want to do.
Right.
You know, okay, what is that? How do I get that up to an adequacy so it can be non-distracting from the strengths?
Right.
Or I can get it up there. Some of you may not be excellent communicators. Some of you may not be excellent, you might not be excellently reliable. I say this from personal experience. Mm-hmm. You probably will never be excellent at that unless it's part of your class and you've been really avoiding it. But you should be okay. You should be able to get okay at it.
Yeah.
At least non-distractingly bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important about universal mechanics is if you're standing in too much fire, it's going to be a major problem on your healers.
Yeah.
Don't be a major problem for your healers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically, or if you're a healer, don't be a major problem for your tank. Whoever your reliable party is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a core component I want to talk about weaknesses, and look towards your class now after you've kind of accepted it, validated it, not judged it, and been honest with it, and gone, okay, that's what I'm good at, that's what I like in the world. Okay, what are some of the downsides of that thing that I need to keep my eye on and watch for, kind of being able to spiral me out of control?
Absolutely, and see where those weaknesses, and again, awareness.
We're back to it. Hey, we had a whole episode where it wasn't the tag word when Sophia was here, but we're back.
We're back.
We're back.
Look at it and say, where am I the weakness? Where those weaknesses exist within my class, and where can I shore them up? And maybe be really honest with yourself and be like, that's just not important. Mm-hmm. That's not the thing that I'm going to focus my energy on. Where's the stuff that I can focus my energy on and get the greatest skill ups out of?
Right.
Versus, and I think this was something that you touched on earlier, where you're like, I will not be a leader like these other people in my company, but I can be a leader in my own way that's success for me.
Yeah, and I won't be this big brains. The design one really was resonating. That Always Sunny in Philadelphia conspiracy theory meme. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to be that guy. I'm never going to have that big brain plan like that. But by knowing that, if I'm a rogue, and this is how I define rogue, who are the classes in my professional portion of my guild, my work group, who need to be part of my group? I probably should have a couple of those in the group who are not great at the things I'm good at.
Right.
That's how we should be forming groups, and that's the last portion I wanted to talk about that I actually didn't write down. Group there's that too, I think, but since I have a natural segue, I'm just going to
absolutely.
It's know your group, your class helps you understand your guild and group composition. We talked about this a little bit on the episode of guilds. Yeah. But if you're a warlock, and that means a thing, and you can identify a lot of other people in your life as warlocks, maybe they're cool to hang out with and comfortable. Yeah. You probably are a terrible raid group. Yeah. You're probably not really helping each other as much as you can, because that's where echo chambers really come into play. Yeah, you're those people always on the forum saying your class is weak no matter what's going on at that point. Yeah. And I think group composition, if I'm a rogue, the last thing I need is other rogues. I got rogue. I got that on handle. I need paladins. Mm-hmm. I need warriors. I need mages. I need warlocks. I need people who can, and I have my own definitions for this. I need people who are really detail oriented to be thinking about the tough stuff that's kind of going to slip under my radar. Mm-hmm. I need people who have strong moral compasses to be like, hey, I'm not like amoral or immoral, but it's like the difference of like how important the right thing to do is. You need some people to help check you on that in case you're just being a jerk and you don't realize it. Mm-hmm. I need people who are interested in craftsmanship and fine work, right? Mm-hmm. High standards of work. Those people need to be in my life because they all help me be supported by those things and learn more about those so that I can get out of fire. Mm-hmm. Like, those people will help you understand how to handle some of those universal mechanics because they're really good at stuff you're bad at. And hopefully, vice versa, you're adding something to their life
absolutely.
That that's not their strength.
Right.
Sure. Like, I think if we're, I always say mage is an AoE class, just something that just blasts everything around it. Yeah. These are the people who I think are really active in life. They're really like, they see something and they go do it. They're just AoEing everything down. I'm like, this is really valuable. Sometimes I'm too lazy. I'm like, oh, that's irrelevant. I can learn from this kind of energy.
Right, absolutely. Oops, sorry.
But I can teach the mage that AoEing down the whole raid takes forever. Yeah. Maybe target, maybe focus, maybe be relevant or have relevancy. Does that
Yeah,
make
absolutely.
sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
No, that totally makes sense.
And so that's kind of a way I think you can see your class as a outcome, and look at your group around you. Having a couple other rogues is probably not bad. Personally, I get annoyed by other people like me, so that doesn't work. But you know, make sure that you don't have too many. Make sure you're not making a bad raid group because it's a comfortable conversation on the forums.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be very easy to do that.
It's I think our natural tendency if you leave it alone.
Although I'm going to be honest, I get weirdly competitive with other paladins, so maybe that's my own thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something for me to discuss with a therapist, but and then do we want to talk about resources?
Yeah, that was the last thing we kind of wrote down. Is I think one of the things about classes is each class and your own definition of class has different resources. I think this is something really relevant to you.
For sure.
As somebody especially lately has been looking at how do I, and we talked about MP. MP is not even a shorthand for mana. It's a shorthand for resource, let's say. MP could be, my MP and Carolee's MP works extremely differently.
Absolutely.
I'm sure yours does too. But like, let's even look at the 3 WoW. And I actually know 3 people like this, so this helps. So one of them is not in our chat right now, and she usually is.
Yeah.
But it's like you have mana. You start kind of with a high amount, and it spends over the day. And at the end of the day, it's going to be emptier than it started, and you're going to need to charge it up. You know, that's one way. Energy. Hey, I can kind of go. It doesn't matter how long I'm going, as long as I'm not going too hard at any given point in time.
Right.
Like, kind of like cyclical. I'm actually a little bit more like that.
Uh-huh.
And then rage. I start empty, and as I do stuff, I get build up and build up and build up. These are just 3 silly WoW examples. But how does your energy work? Do you? Yeah. And this comes into things we say. Well, I'm a morning person. I'm an evening person.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like you're a morning person.
I absolutely am.
You're a mana person.
Yeah, I'm
You're
a mana
strong mana. You start full and you end empty.
Yep.
And I'm a night person. I think I'm energy or rage of some kind. I'm probably energy because I get tired in the middle of the day. But it's like, yeah, give me some things that energize me, and I can take some time. I can go spend that. Yeah. But it's like it's up and down all day. I need to constantly be managing my resource up and down and making sure I'm not letting it sit there unused, but also not using so much I can't cast skills. Think about this for you, and maybe the WoW examples aren't perfect. Maybe you're like, oh, I think this is kind of how it works. This is part of your class. If you try to fight against it, fighting against it is not productive.
Yeah.
Improving your efficiency, leveraging it, extending its value, increasing your max mana or your max rage or your max energy is a fine maneuver. Trying to change your rage into energy is probably being dishonest with yourself because could you do it?
Probably, yeah.
Should you do it? How much effort does it take you to unwire the firmware in your brain about that for what result?
Absolutely.
Is that where you want to be? Or can we leverage these equally fine resources to get different value?
Yeah, and I think it's actually interesting that you brought up the firmware thing. I think that's one thing that we don't really touch on, but might be a good one here just to kind of like introduce it as a concept is, thinking about a computer, right? You've got hardware, you've got firmware, and you've got software. And they're each individual layers and of how integral they are to the system running properly. If you're not a huge, techie person who doesn't really understand it, it's like your hardware is what you absolutely have to work with. I think for me, I kind of envision it as your body. This is your hardware. This is what you're dealing with.
The very hard to the nigh impossible, not absolutely impossible.
Yeah,
but
I mean it's not impossible, but it's really really difficult to change.
And some of it is unchangeable. For example, I think it would actually be impossible if you're like, you're tall. That's a part of your hardware, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So that's one thing that you have to consider. The next level up is your firmware, and so those are kind of like those really baked in ideas about who you are, what you are, how the world operates, identity. All those type of things. Yeah. Those really like baked in things that you're probably not thinking about every single day, but that influence how you see the world.
Right.
So those are the type of things that I think are more firmware related. And then software is like everything else, like just ideas that come to you or things that you read or things like that. It's really easy to change and update and move around. So that's just kind of a really, really high level way that we use those terms. So I would say that your class and those types of things are more of a firmware. And so that's how you should think about it. It's like, it's kind of it kind of exists. It kind of doesn't really have, there's a lot of other stuff that's dependent on it. It runs a lot of things for you. And it's a good way to kind of see it as, it's not very changeable. Like if you think about how often your firmware gets updated, it's not a whole lot compared to like say software.
Right. But more often than hardware. If we're assuming you only get one computer, you don't get to keep rebuilding. Yeah. Although,
that's how
give us 50 years, we could have cool stuff. I'm ready for robot legs. See, my whole health plan is based on me being able to replace things cybernetically or I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that's a really, thanks for calling that out, because that's one thing I really want to talk about is I think firmware is changeable. It is. To change firmware should require a level of need that's in accordance with the difficulty of change.
Right.
For example,
and an understanding that it's going to be more difficult than just changing your software.
Right. I'm going to use a straw man to talk about firmware a little bit because I think it's relevant. Yeah. Is let's say in the accordance of class, you're like, let's say I'm a rogue and I really wish I was a warrior. Okay, well, if a warrior is like a more ideal idea, I'm like, I think I like it better or something like that. My firmware is so against these ideas in a lot of cases, it's going to be very hard for me to change. If me being a rogue is actually like, I'm having a total change of who I am, I'm like shedding a skin, like this only, and I feel like this really is only super relevant to think about in what I've seen in really extreme scenarios. You know, deep into abusive substances or abusive relationships or other things that are creating a lot of active damage that are really like negatively driven, as opposed to, I wish I was instead of this positive potential, this positive potential. That's not what's going to lead to change for a lot of people, right? So much of that firmware is going to be driving your decision making. Let's leverage that firmware, and that's what this is really about. Is saying, who are you? Don't judge it harshly, even though you have strengths and weaknesses. Lean into your class, know your resources, build your group around these ideas, and use it as a framework to help you know where you can be exceptional and where you just need to be adequate and where you don't need to work at all.
Yeah, and I like how you said exceptional. Like, look at where you can be exceptional, because I think it's, at least for some people, and I speak for myself here, it can be difficult to be the class that you are. Yeah. It can be uncomfortable. It can be not so cool to be that in your group or whatever. And I mean, I think when you look at those like top tier guilds that are like, well, we can't take any shamans because shamans are just garbage this expansion or something like that. Right. Like, that exists in real life.
It does.
It really does. And so if you find yourself in a group of people who aren't accepting of your class, I think it can be really easy for you to say like, well, I guess I gotta change classes then.
Or my class is the problem, as opposed to saying my guild just doesn't like my kind of class, and it's kind of not changeable.
Absolutely. And I think it can be really easy to get into that space. But remember, and this is my feel-good moment for the week, I think, is like, remember you are who you are, and that's all good. It's like, just because the guild doesn't like you right now, just because shamans aren't like top DPS right now, it doesn't mean that shamans are bad.
Right. And it's usually like 2% difference, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is really a takeaway, is like, if we're talking about, what are we talking about when we talk about class today? Yeah. Is we're really talking about self-acceptance, and how to use self-acceptance is not a kind of hand-wavy. I've seen this a lot. Yeah. And I've seen this back when I used to work as a VA for self-help. Yeah. So I've been adjacent to self-help a lot and kind of watched what's gone on there. And a lot of it's just believe in yourself and love yourself, and it's kind of like overly positive affirmation that's not actually useful.
Toxic positivity.
Yeah, honestly. And it's a weird concept, right? Because like, I feel like we have a natural thing. Some of us have a little bit more cynicism to us. Are going to be like, oh, that doesn't seem realistic. And the problem is it doesn't recognize acceptance requires understanding, acceptance, but also not a pass. Yeah. Just because I'm a rogue doesn't give me a pass to go do asshole rogue stuff. I can't gank. I don't get to gank people and go, oh, I'm a rogue. Eat my butt, right? Like, that's not how that works, right? Like, I could do that. But
Yeah.
that's not a positive thing. I don't get to.
For sure.
It's kind of like I see people who are really into astrology sometimes go, well, I'm an Aquarius. I'm just kind of a dick about it. You're like, well, you don't get to do that.
I see people do that about being a Slytherin.
Yeah, I do too.
A lot. Where there's like, I'm a Slytherin, so I'm an asshole. Like, not necessarily, guys.
Right, and I think that's the kind of thing we really want to say is self-acceptance is a positive thing.
Yeah.
It is the right way to help you with growth. I've lived this myself. I've seen this in others, and it's the best way to keep you motivated. And okay, Ruby's gone.
Ruby's gone, but Ollie's here now. So
it's the best way to keep you motivated, on track, and earnest and authentic with yourself. But we have to make sure that we're not using it as an excuse for us to otherwise just not grow or be weak at things that we really need to not be, or treat our guild members badly because of our class, or use it as an excuse for otherwise behavior you wouldn't accept if you didn't try to do that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really the takeaway. So, to summarize it, I think we're kind of through many of the talking points here.
Yeah.
So to summarize it, I think know your class. Try to look at your...
Ooh.
Thanks, Ollie.
Ollie Buzz.
Ollie is the clumsiest dog, and now he's just laying here. Sorry, let me try again. The takeaways for today's stream is to find your class, look at your natural behaviors, look at how you navigate and see the world, and then accept that as okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. Define it, give it a language that resonates for you. Use that, and then understand how to use that to create your success criteria. If you're a healer, don't try to DPS. If you're a tank, don't worry too much about a healing output. Think about this kind of stuff and use it as things to make things that don't need to be important, that might be tempting from social media, friend groups, and other influences, not relevant to your growth pattern. Use SMART goals and set targets that you can measure, look at, and understand.
Yeah.
Finally, or not finally, two more things. Understand your resource and how that is. That is a part of your class, and you should be leveraging that to grow unless the situation is earnestly dire, which I don't think most of us are in.
No.
That's a very rare situation. And finally, build your group, your guild, and everything around complementary classes. Accept different classes and how you can overlap. And Ruby's
She's trying to get Ollie to play with her.
And then know that resource and leverage it to be the best version of the class you can be. Look at your weaknesses and make sure you don't fall into just standing in fire because this is not part of your class.
Right, absolutely.
That everything?
I feel like that's a good
I feel like that's everything.
I feel like that's a good coverage. Thank you for taking up the wheel this time around.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a Ruby voice right there.
Yeah, absolutely. She's been trying to get Ollie to play with her like all day, and he won't do it because he's kind of a grumpy old man.
Yeah.
And so she gets pissy if people won't play with her. So.
Well, I think that's the end of our subject matter for today, and I think because we're like with a little bit of with you still needing to recover, I'm not going to stick around for too much Q&A today.
But if anybody does have a question, we're more than happy to talk about any questions that you might have. She would love my Luna. Yeah, Ruby loves to play. She loves getting into games, but she's a little intense. Which I appreciate about her because I can be that way too, and so I love that dog. She's pretty awesome. But yeah, she does take a lot of. She's needy.
She's a little dog that takes a lot of space.
Yeah, she is.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Serge. Appreciate the chat. It was pretty clear. I'm really self-aware, so this part I believe I have covered. That's great, man.
Yeah.
Hey, and this is a good part to do it, but make sure to keep using it as that self-awareness to make decisions.
Yeah.
Don't just be self-aware, leverage that self-awareness.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Again, if you're self-aware and you're doing a great job, awesome. This is something I've seen a lot of people, including ourselves at different points in our lives, struggle with. We wanted to add that and make sure that...
Yeah, absolutely.
This is something I wish somebody would have told me 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's basically what Westholme is. Stuff I wish somebody would have told me before. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate you. We will see you again next week at 1 p.m. on Saturday with a new episode. Hopefully, all of us at 100%. Not
so done, you guys. I'm so done having the flu.
She's a trooper. Everybody, everybody send Carolee some love on social media. Help her get well soon. We're all rooting for her. She showed up and was a trooper here today despite having a long day and a long week. So I appreciate you, Boo.
And everybody else who came and checked out our stream last week
of
Left 4 Dead. If you thought that was cool, let us know. We definitely have we kind of have a foursome that's available to play Left 4 Dead with us.
Yeah, we'd like to do some viewer games maybe. Just
viewer
kind of
games and stuff like that. Because I think we talked about this earlier is we would like to make affiliate, and that means more hours. And so if you have a suggestion for what you'd like to see us do during those extra hours, let us know. It could be anything from like... We'll take game suggestions. Like
we could do Q&A sessions and just chats and like, hey, let's talk about things. What are you feeling? I think it actually might be about a time for one of those. Maybe that'd be a good thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll talk about it more on the Running Westholme Twitter at Run Westholme. Make sure to follow us there, please. We'll have the VODs up here and on YouTube eventually. Well,
they're on YouTube. They're just all private right now because I need to do a little bit of editing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I also need to do it. We have stuff to do.
We got stuff. We always got stuff to do.
But thanks again so much for your support. You're joining us. We love doing this, and we hope if we even just help a few people, we're feeling really good about what this is doing.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody, and we will see you next week, and take care.
Yep. Bye from the doggies, too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.